Most people think plastic was invented by some rich company like Exxon or Shell, but that's not true. Plastic was first created in a laboratory by a man named John Wesley Hyatt in 1862. He was a totally average guy who just wanted to make something of himself. But his life changed forever when he learned about a competition being hosted by the American Inventors Association. They were offering a prize to anyone who could find a substitute for ivory. See, back then, billiard balls were made from ivory, and the elephant population had been decimated due to poachers. This meant two things. Billiards had become very expensive, and the rich guys playing the game were getting pretty pissed. There was just one small problem. Hyatt didn't have any ideas. But luckily, his brother Tom worked in a cellulose nitrate factory, which produced things like photographic film. One day he brought home some of their waste product, which contained long chains of molecules called polymers. Hyatt threw them into a mold, heated it up, and out popped a ball. It was smooth, hard, and looked identical to an ivory ball. In fact, it was so good that Hyatt won the prize and became famous overnight. His invention was initially called Parksine, but soon after it was renamed to plastic, and everyone thought this was great. Finally, they could make all kinds of stuff out of plastic, from piano keys to fake diamonds. For a while, it seemed like plastic was a miracle material. But the only reason why we haven't all died yet is because we did something crazy. You see, plastic was supposed to be recyclable. When Hyatt first invented it, he said, "This material can be, so far as I am able to discover, reproduced indefinitely without any deterioration," but he was wrong. After years of use, plastic started breaking down and polluting the environment. It filled up our oceans, killed sea animals, and made its way into the food chain. At this point, everyone knew that plastic was a disaster waiting to happen. But instead of changing how we use it, we decided to change what we're made of. In the late 70s, scientists discovered that there was a way to make plastic that wouldn't destroy the world. It was called PVC, or polyvinyl chloride. Unlike other types of plastic, it was highly durable, which meant it wouldn't break down as quickly. Plus, it was easy to manufacture and cheap. Soon enough, everything was made out of PVC: window frames, pipes, flooring, raincoats, and eventually, credit cards. But this wasn't actually a good thing. You see, PVC contains chlorine, which makes it resistant to both water and fire, but that comes at a cost. Producing it releases dioxins into the environment, which are among the most toxic chemicals ever made. Even worse, when PVC breaks down, it releases something called styrofoam, which accumulates in landfills and never disappears. Most people don't know this, but the ground where over 50% of Americans live is slowly turning into foam. And that's not even the worst part. When you burn PVC to get rid of it, it releases hydrochloric acid, which causes respiratory problems. And if you eat it, it gives you cancer. That's why there are hundreds of thousands of people who die from cancer every single year, despite the fact that it hasn't even been around for that long. Given how bad this stuff is for us, why is it still being used everywhere? Well, the answer is money. Making PVC requires a lot of energy and manpower, which means it's relatively expensive. But there's a cheaper alternative called PET, or polyethylene. It's extremely versatile, which means it can be used to make anything from plastic bags to fuel tanks. In fact, PET is so common that the ocean is starting to fill up with it. The only problem is it breaks down in less than 10 years. And when it does, it leaves behind particles smaller than a sesame seed called microplastics. These are so tiny that they can't be filtered out by water treatment plants. This means that most of the water we drink is now full of plastic, which can increase the risk of cancer, diabetes, and even affect your fertility. And if that doesn't scare you, this next fact will. Every single year, we produce nearly 300 million tons of plastic waste. And since none of it biodegrades, it keeps piling up. If you want to see a mountain range made of plastic, just take a trip to Texas There's an area full of discarded plastic 6 stories high that will blow your mind. Now, before you start panicking, let me tell you this. This plastic mountain has been here since the 90s. In other words, it's been 30 years since all this garbage was made. That means the rate at which we produce plastic waste is absolutely insane. If things continue like today, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. Not only that, but every piece of plastic ever made still exists somewhere out there, whether it's sitting in a landfill or floating in the ocean. Since no one's cleaning it up, most of it is slowly breaking down into particles that will poison the planet for millions of years. By now, you've probably figured out that we're screwed. But what's really crazy is that there was an alternative to plastic all along. Right now, nearly all plastic is made from fossil fuels. But there's nothing that says it has to be that way. What if it was possible to make plastic out of thin air? Well, believe it or not, it can. A company called Air Company uses carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases to make plastic pellets that can be turned into almost any plastic product you can imagine. They're currently selling vodka bottles made out of captured carbon dioxide. But their goal is to make everyday products like clothing, phone cases, and furniture. With this technology, we can finally stop using precious fossil fuels for plastic production. And if that happens, plastic might just have a future. Some people say China is the biggest polluter in the world, but that's not quite true. China is responsible for 30% of the world's pollution, which is a lot. But it's only half of what the United States is responsible for. America is the single biggest polluter in history. To put things into perspective, it emits 4 times the carbon dioxide of China, 50 times more than India, and 150 times more than the entire European Union. And even though America is just 5% of the world's population, it accounts for over 25% of excess carbon dioxide emissions. Everyone thinks China should do more to protect the environment, but the United States should probably do a lot more too.